Hello, and this is a wonderful Ask the Expert. I've been joined by my good friend Dr. Alan Morgan, and I'm just going to ask Alan to introduce himself.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Lovely to be here. Thanks for inviting me. So, I'm Alan Morgan. I currently work at the University of Plymouth, where I work on environmental and sustainability education and outdoor learning modules. My background is as a practicing teacher of 10 years secondary, with geography and science being my disciplines. But I guess I was increasingly frustrated by a school context constrained by the curriculum at the time when I really wanted to fly around the issues that seem to be pressing us in terms of sustainability and global dimension. So I made a transition somewhat. I did a master's course in environmental and development education that was very much framed about education for sustainability, which was quite a new thing in the early 90s. It was related to the Rio UNCED, Rio Earth Conference, and that was when some of this material started to really gain some momentum. And fortunately, I was in the right place at the right time, and I made a transition into being a teacher advisor. First in a charity in Cardiff, and then working for a local authority as a Education for Sustainable Development Officer in Worcestershire County Council. And from there, I made a transition into the world of higher education. So from about 2002, I've been working in universities involved in teacher education, initial teacher training, and increasingly more recently, more generic orientations around education, what it's about, what it could be about. So I think that's a little bit of background about me.
That was great, and I like the what it could be all about at the end because that's what we're going to be discussing.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, we all love a good metaphor, and I really was touched by the when you were talking about scales on the eyes and in terms of nature connection. And I wonder if you could just sort of explain what you mean by that phrase, and how do they get there?
Yeah, so I think the metaphor, I'm not even sure where it's from, probably biblical, is about the idea that when we are engaging with the world, quite often we're engaging in a way that is as if we had scales on our eyes, almost like a reptilian extra eyelid that we don't even notice is there. And a metaphor, often in sort of spiritual traditions, is that we're not seeing the world clearly through the world darkly. And it's only when those scales fall from our eyes that we get full vision and we fully realize what the world is like and could be around us. So the metaphor to me speaks of the fact that we're going around engaging with the world in a way that is not as optimal as it might be, is actually um, giving us a skewed understanding of our relationship with the world, with each other, with nature. And ideally, what we want to do is to clear that impediment to clear thinking, to metaphorically remove the scales from our eyes, which is often what people say. The scales fell from their eyes and they saw clearly. So yeah, that's what I see the metaphor as speaking to. And then in terms of what the scales might be, in terms of our work and our conversations, it's it's to my mind that the idea that we are living in our contemporary, and I particularly stress Western modern lifestyle, as if we are separate from each other, separate from the natural world, and separate from our more deeper inner selves. It's a lifestyle that tends to encourage us to think at a superficial level, tends to encourage us to think very individualistically rather than relational. It's a worldview that tends to encourage the concept of success being measured by material possessions and accumulating things rather than so more quantities rather than qualities. And I think that's what we need to guard against. I think that's what we need to try and see that other ways of living are possible. And that's what I mean by metaphorically helping people to remove the scales from their eyes.
Mm. In a school context, then, I mean, I would imagine that most children in the very early years don't have these scales. Is that a sort of the current thinking?
I'd say that that's largely the case. I think,
Mm,
and I think this is what you're alluding to, where the scales have come from.
mm,
I think we could argue they're socially constructed largely. So it's the ambient society within which you find yourself and in which you're growing up that can sort of paint the scales onto your eyes. So if you live in a society that is oriented around individualism, competition, uh, accumulation, etc., you cannot help but absorb those values, and they accrete, if that's the word. They sort of build onto your eyes, and they're doing it imperceptibly because it's just the prevailing climate, environment, culture that you're growing up in that they sort of get painted on. But as you say, we don't drop into this life, this existence with them already there. And I think human beings, as with all juveniles, are much more naturalistic, and they will carry on and have a relationship with the world that is sort of much more natural in that respect. So they have those a natural propensity to be relational, to be connecting with nature. Having said that, younger people are notoriously um, starting from themselves, self-centered, egocentric. So I think as well that maybe this could be something that is a scale in itself that
mm,
is starting in early childhood that can be reinforced by our culture rather than be removed by our culture. And just stretching the metaphor a little bit, perhaps, but this is why I think many spiritual traditions also say one needs to become more childlike again, which is a way of seeing the world anew as if through the eyes of a child when those scales are relatively thin or absent. That doesn't mean become childish, it means childlike, which is opening the eyes to the immensity of all the experiences and wonder that the world presents to us, that we get filtered out as those cultural accretions sort of get in the way.
mm.
Does that make sense?
It does make perfect sense. And I'm thinking about a lot of what's happening in a lot of classrooms. And my experience as a teacher and a head is that the education, particularly primary education, is getting more sedentary, it's getting more inside, it's getting more screen based, it's getting more knowledge accumulation based, and how do we get those experiences back into primary schools so that we avoid the accretion of these scales. And I'm just wondering what teachers can do to actually sort of combat this, and particularly extending that, how can they justify their actions? Because I know that in some schools it'll be easier, in other schools it'll be more of a challenge.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you've hit on a very powerful level at which these accretions get painted on, if you like, which is in the school context.
Mm,
And you've portrayed the contemporary school culture, which you've got a more insider knowledge of, but it does speak to what I understand of, we've got to induct our children into preparedness for adult life, which means a life of competition and scrutiny. So we've got to get them ready, exam ready, etc. So they've been oriented around factories of producing people ready for the workplace, etc. And the most efficient way of doing that is getting them indoors, sat down in serried ranks and being told stuff like they're empty vessels to fill. But I think that's kind of understandable because schools are themselves subcultures within a broader culture, which is also kind of telling them that is the way the world is and how it should work. So it's a kind of double whammy of cultural challenges to overcome. So on a broader scale, I wish that we had a culture that was more oriented to getting people to think differently about what it means to succeed, less materialistic, less accumulative, more about engaging with qualities of life, which to my mind, and I think the way that we have evolved means connecting with nature. And that also being what should be informing our schools as well. Now, schools as a subculture of the bigger culture, understandably, are being informed by the broader culture, but also they have a degree of relative autonomy to fight against it, or maybe fight is a bit too combative, but to resist it or to find an alternative approach, which is where I think you're saying, what could a busy school teacher do? And there's a lovely phrase that I picked up along the way from, I think it's Giroux, who is a, a critical educator, who talks about using our relative autonomy and our opportunity and our position as transformative intellectuals. So people who in a cultural context do have agency and power to make a shift. And the kind of shift that you do have in your power, let's try and take advantage of it. So if it means, and more practical levels, taking the learning outside into the school grounds or within a walking distance, then that can be a real powerful way of changing things. Um, Trying to think about pedagogies that are more collaborative, more relational, less individualistic, less competition oriented, celebrating types of success that aren't always um, those kinds of things would be quite a powerful way to move forward. But I acknowledge that we are constrained by the framework and the situation we're in, which includes so many things: school culture, the national curriculum in England in particular. It is hopefully going to change soon. It might become less constraining in these respects. But when I see that the prevailing curriculum that we've had in place in England, specifically since about 2013, it has been more about directing us into the ways of thinking that I think are the problem.
Mm.
Whereas the curriculum that was prior to this, curriculum 2000, was more oriented about maybe breaking out of those things. And there, we could get in a whole debate about the ideological underpinnings of all of that, but we are also in the process of having a curriculum review that might make a difference as well. So I've rather rambled there.
No, not at all.
Um, there's structural changes that need to happen, but there's changes at individual practice or school-based practice that could make a real difference. So
Mm.
every teacher, every individual educator has a great deal of agency, but they've got to use, and again, this is another phrase, their relative autonomy. So yes, you are under scrutiny. Yes, you do have to deliver stuff. You do have to meet certain professional standards, but you also have some relative autonomy to do that in a way that is fulfilling your role, but in a way that's different, that can be trying to explore ways of connecting people with nature, for example, as one way of trying to remove the scales from people's eyes. So
Mm.
taking the learning outdoors, you can deliver every aspect of the curriculum in an outdoor context, but
Absolutely.
that very infrequently happens, I'd
Yeah.
say.
Even
For
in
host, for
Devon.
instance, yes, yes. And I get it. It's challenging. People are very busy. They've got a throughput of a lot of content to get through, and it's a quite efficient way to just do it in a constrained, controlled environment of a classroom. But it would be so much more enriching if occasionally, at least, and until such time as the school culture, curriculum culture gives a bit more latitude to do this more legitimately, and then maybe a broader societal change can give even more latitude, then the direction of travel will be in the right way. But use what you can, where you can, and how you can to make the little changes. Again, I don't want to come across as religious. I'm not particularly, but I think some of the wisdom traditions, as I prefer to call them, have a lot to say about this. And so I've got Welsh heritage. The patron saint of Wales is Saint David. One of his famous things was do the little things, do the things that you can do within your power and your agency to do, and they'll build up and they will aggregate. If you're doing your little things, other people are doing their little things, we can make a change and a shift.
Mm. Absolutely. And on that sort of spiritual side as well, I think the word that really resonates with me that you said was is this relational. I think that it's not only relational to nature, but relational to each other. and that really is key to sort of changing a culture. And I've found that with classes that when you have those relationships and you mutually like each other, and there is that feeling of love, for want of a better word, in the classroom,
Yeah,
then children do connect better to each other. They connect better to nature. You take them outside, you are a unit rather than sort of being disparate and actually sort of the hierarchy sort of the teacher and the children. I think that those hierarchies can be broken down and you are mutual learners together in that relational sense. I think, I mean, yeah, that's
absolutely. I think
that.
relational could be a substitution for religious, spiritual. It could be a more amenable term to people, but that's kind of what I think the key messages
Mm,
are. And I think you've hit the nail on the head in terms of where the relationships are with others, with each other, with the natural world. And there's another relation that we are tending to miss, which is with ourselves,
mm,
with our intrapersonal being. So our deeper understanding of our emotional levels and awareness and what it means to be human is something that we so infrequently don't think about. It's very shallow and superficial,
mm,
our understanding of what it means to be human in the Western modern worldview. But I think there's so much more that can be said that will be synergistically reinforced by these multiple relational explorations with each other, with the environment, with myself.
yeah,
And they're all kind of mutually reinforcing, I'd say.
absolutely. And
And that
seeing
goes for
ourselves.
teachers as well.
Yeah,
Adults, this is a lifelong, life-wide learning project. And as an educator, if I've grown at all, it's on the back of being an educator that's explored these things and found that it's worked for me as well,
yeah,
whilst supposedly delivering it as an adult to novices and juveniles, is actually finding out this is working for me too.
yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
getting so much more out of being alive and the
Yes.
like.
That was a good day at the end of the day. You think that that was good?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, definitely.
Everybody feels energized by that.
Yeah,
I think there's so much more we could talk about, but I think this is a good place to sort of to stop for now. But Alan, as ever, it's great to talk. It always is very stimulating and exciting talking
yes,
to you. So thank you. And I think maybe we could do this. We could do a sort of a version 2 or 3 or 4. We could have a whole
yeah,
series. We could go on
def
Netflix. Yeah.
definitely. And I appreciate it because it's through the dialogue with yourself and like-minded people, but equally non-like-minded people that
Mm.
you get to think about and reflect on these ideas yourself. So yeah, that's brilliant. And maybe there's an opportunity for dialogue stimulated by our conversation now from the audience or people that could
Yeah,
make some comments from their perspective. And do they agree? Do they disagree? Do they have solutions? Do they anticipate barriers? These kind of things.
absolutely. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much. I'm
Thank you.